Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. Per usual, we're closing out the work week here with 12 NBA games on Friday, Nate, that we are looking at here in this best bets video that we have for you. Also going to have a play of props video up for you as well, so make sure to like and subscribe to that page and continue to follow along each and every weekday this season and into this postseason as well. Also want you to head to thelines.com and use everything that we are putting up on the site right now, including that prop finder tool that we always use to make sure that we're getting the best odds available to us from all these books that are giving us bets this season. Pretty good night here on Thursday, Nate, overall. Went with our gut in a few places. Miami ended up getting taken to the woodshed at the end, the beginning of the game, what have you. But either way, we pressed on with a lot more options here on Friday than we had on Thursday.
Yeah, Tyrese Maxey. I mean, Embiid being back unlocked Tyrese Maxey. That's what happened in that game. The Heat at least gave us a fair shake. But yeah, we move on here, 12-game slate, and we're going over in this Knicks at Bulls game. Your under did not hit at the Garden against the Kings, who had been going under with everybody. And now the Knicks are on the road on a back-to-back, and there's a bizarre rest discrepancy here because the Bulls haven't played since Monday. So it's a crazy difference. I mean, certainly, if you're going to take a side, it's got to be the Bulls based on that, but I'm not going to fade Tom Thibodeau's squad just because they're at a rest disadvantage. What I am going to do is assume their defense is going to take a little bit of a hit here. And I mean, Mitch Robb only able to play 15 minutes last night. I don't know if he'll go at all on back-to-back. Probably not. Hartenstein should have his minutes limited if he does go on back-to-backs, and that means Precious Achiuwa, Jericho Sims in there, like just not the same caliber of defense for the Knicks. And then you look at the Bulls, on 2+ days rest this year, their games average 232. You look at their recent ones too, against some of the best defenses in the league. 252 total against Minnesota, 220 NOLA, 241 versus Boston. At home, you know, I've been calling them, like, lumping them in with like these great defenses. They're not really a great defense when you break it down. Like, they have the 5th worst defensive rating at home since the All-Star break, and they've gone over this total in 10 straight home games, despite playing at a pretty slow pace. And then their defense, which funnels three-point shots to the opponent, that's going to be trouble against a Knicks team that's scoring the second highest percentage of points off threes since the All-Star break, with Dante DiVincenzo being on fire. Part of the reason that game goes over, hits another 5 threes on Thursday night here. So, I mean, it's a pretty good matchup for that Knicks offense to keep pace here. Brunson went for 31-13 last matchup. They scored 116. And on the other side, I mean, Vooch did not play in that game for the Bulls, so they only get 100. But when you have Vooch and DeMar DeRozan, you have this like mid-range counter for what the Knicks do so well, right? Which is pack it in and try to run you off the 3-point line. But does a mid-range maven like DeMar DeRozan have success against them? Well, yes, he does. Last 8 against the Knicks with Chicago, he's averaging 27.5 at 50% shooting. Vooch is averaging 20 at 53%. And at that point, when they faced off, they hadn't even unlocked Ayo Dosunmu, who's playing very well at this stage. Knicks back-to-back numbers, I mean, they've gone over this total in 9 straight back-to-backs. They have a 122 defensive rating in those. So that's really the key here, is the rest discrepancy, along with the fact that the Knicks have these road home splits where they score 10 more on the road, and the defense is going to take a little bit of a hit here away from the Garden.
Yep, all that. I was on the same thing as you with this one. The no rest stuff for the Knicks is really interesting. The matchup in general. I mean, they've just weirdly, they kind of continued a trend of playing better offense than they have been playing defense over the last like week or two, really 2 weeks almost of the season, where, like you said, they're raining threes. Josh Hart is pushing the tempo. That was part of what I thought. I thought he was going to sit on the first leg of a back-to-back here, but they kept him in, and it was a tougher matchup tonight than they're going to have in Chicago. So I understand Hart playing now, but I did kind of seem like things were pointing towards him resting. And he pushes the pace for this team a ton, especially when he gets boards the way he does. And obviously, if he's going to score 31 points like he did against the Kings, it's very helpful. But that was just found money more than anything. And he was a big reason that they scored 120, obviously. So, yeah, but without Mitch Rob as well, he was a big reason that I thought the under might hit if he did play. And he limited Domas. But it was a lot of the outside shooting for this team that did the bulk of the damage. And the Bulls, as bad as they've been at hitting threes, like you said, the mid-range has been there for them. And if they can hit some jump shots tomorrow, the 211 shouldn't be too much for these teams that have gone over this number 3 of their last 4 as well. So I'm going to go with Indy -4.5 taking on the Thunder at home here. And to be honest, like I initially texted you earlier and I was like, yo, what do you think about the over in this game? And it was like, actually, wait, what do I think about the under in this game? To be honest, I think the offense is going to continue to be very lackluster. What was confusing me here was, like, if you look at the way the Thunder have had their guys injured recently, they had SGA, then they didn't have, then they did have him, then they didn't. Jalen Williams played one with him, one without him. Then they both missed the last 2. And the last 2 is now really what I'm focused on for this Thunder team, which is like, oh yeah, this is like kind of like the 76ers without Maxey or Embiid. It's like, oh, your 2 best scorers aren't there. You really don't have much behind them. And everybody that's good behind them is pretty reliant on those 2 dudes to do what they do, right? So, for instance, Josh Giddey is a good fade because like he has been heavily reliant on when J-Dub was in there in those couple games without SGA, right? They at least had some semblance of 2 backcourt guys, one that was more the facilitator, honestly, which was J-Dub. And then, Giddey actually scored a lot of points off that. Now, I don't think he's going to be the type of player to be able to handle that. And what's the last couple of games prove that. Now, I know they played Boston and they played Philadelphia, but Philadelphia was not, it was a shell of its team, right? In that game against the Thunder. Then they ended up coming back and beating them. But for this, the Thunder offense is really what I'm looking at. 28th and 27th in offensive rating, 28th in defensive rating, which is partly skewed by getting just waxed by probably the best offense in the league in Boston, especially when they're hitting shots. But still, like the inability to come along for the ride on offense when your defense is that bad now is a big problem, right? And J-Dub was a huge part of that. You just throw J-Dub on the best offensive player on the other team from whatever position he plays at outside of center. Honestly, 1 through 4, that dude can guard everybody in the league as well as anybody else. So that's going to be a huge part of it. He also pushed the pace a lot and was actually someone who, and Giddey tries to do that, but he doesn't really have any running mates at this point. Maybe Kason Wallace can help them speed the pace up, but they relied so heavily on 3-pointers, second chance points off of turnovers, and even threes, right? They were hitting the 8th most threes in the league prior to these last couple games. And in these last couple, they're, down to the bottom 3, really 3-point team, not being able to score or really even taking a lot of shots from 3. They're taking a lot of the shots from actually right around the rim because they're trying to get into the lane since they don't really have much else in the way of shooting. And honestly, the Pacers, as bad as they've been allowing teams to score in the paint, or as of late especially, they've definitely dropped that amount of field goals they're allowing inside of 5 feet. Their rim field goal percentage from a defensive standpoint has gone way up. And yeah, I like the look of them. I kind of was already looking at them to lose or at least not cover versus Brooklyn yesterday. Like before they played the first game of a back-to-back versus Brooklyn, it was like, okay, they're probably going to smack them here tonight because they're really good at limiting jump shooting, and that's all Brooklyn can do. So they waxed them in the first one. The second one was a clear look ahead for Brooklyn. They were for the Pacers. They were already looking over Brooklyn again after beating them by that much and looking at Oklahoma City in this second leg of the back-to-back. And I think that's what they're ready for. I think they're going to be scoring a ton of points on the fast break. They're going to get it and go when they want to. And really, there's going to be a good amount of missed shots from the Thunder that I think are going to be the reason for that. You're actually going to see the Thunder, I think, be the team that tries to slow things down, knowing that they can't hang with the fluid offense of this Indiana Pacers team. So this is just a really good spot for this really bad rebounding team that's going to give up a lot of points around the paint for the Thunder. Like this is just going to be a game that I think the Pacers take it right to them.
Yeah, I mean, Thunder tipped their hand here. They're ruling out SGA a day early versus they were trying to like play games in that back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday and see if he could go. And he just hasn't been that effective playing with the quad, and they're going to cut their losses here. And I think they're going to take the 3 seed. They're not going to try that hard down the stretch. Like I said, they were punting on the season. Not really. They're kind of just like limping to the finish and doing what they can. But yeah, this is not an important game for them. Indy has, I don't know if they're looking ahead or what they do, but they're a young team. But every time they've lost, they've actually covered 6 straight after a loss. And they won straight up in OKC when SGA was at the height of his power, scoring 30. J-Dub did miss that game though. And the Pacers kind of carved him up for 34 assists, even though they barely hit any threes, 9 for 28 in that game. And they still win by 10. So yeah, I like them just to win here and not worry about the Thunder's offense without their guys here.
Yeah.
So I'll take the Suns though, -3 at home against the Wolves, and not much to poke holes in terms of like why the Wolves have trouble stopping the Phoenix Suns, but I think they have in the last couple matchups here, and I mean Devin Booker is absolutely on one, so that's one thing that you can't really quantify because he hadn't been that kind of all world scorer until the last couple weeks. Really, all season they were trying to like figure it out, right? With integrate Bradley Beal in and out of the lineup, and the Suns get plenty of bad press for like dropping games to the Spurs and all their inconsistencies, but they're starting to round in here where they understand that every game is a playoff game because of the cluttered standings here, and every game is a playoff opponent because they have the hardest schedule in league history, basically down the stretch here. And Book and KD are kind of settling into their playoff modes that we saw down the stretch last year and into the playoffs. And Book now 46 points per game his last two at a 145 rating. KD hasn't even been that efficient, but he has been very good against this Wolves squad. Even Jaden McDaniels has not been able to slow him down. The last time they met, which is all the way back at the beginning of the season, both dudes had 31 and they combined to shoot 70% from the floor, which is just like shows you that, there's no stat for like how good are you against the best scorers in the world, but apparently the Wolves cannot deal with these two guys. And Ant only had 13 in that game. That was with Eric Gordon and Grayson Allen both starting. So it's like, who was even locking up Ant? I guess it was Book for most of the game, but now they have Royce O'Neal. They have Bol putting in quality minutes off the bench. They might get Grayson Allen back in this game. And they were able to beat the Wolves last March, even when Ant did have 31. And while the Wolves, they had a really easy win over Toronto in their last game, this is still 3rd and 4 nights, so it's still a rest disadvantage. They're 6-8 against the spread with the rest disadvantage. Phoenix is 15-6 straight up with the rest advantage, 7 points per game. They're 23-9 straight up as home favorites, too, 6 points per game margin of victory. So, they haven't been as good as expectations when you talk about like covering a big spread or beating bad teams, but we're starting to see that they when they have their antennae up and they know it's a big game, like haven't they gone into Denver and won like recently, like immediately bouncing back from that Spurs loss? So it's like if they have somebody that's on their that they feel is on their level, right, down the stretch in this kind of playoff atmosphere, like they're going to bring it. And we kind of just saw this with Cleveland, the same kind of Cleveland defense, right, as the Wolves, and they had a rest advantage there and they win pretty easily. So maybe that kind of scenario unfolds again.
Yeah, that Cleveland team's a little bit of an enigma. I want to call them a mess as well, to be honest, but Phoenix just took advantage of them by just hitting all their shots early, to be honest. And look, you're not going to find any cracks in this Minnesota defense that you can like rely upon to say like, here's a weakness that they can attack necessarily, but you don't have two defenders as good as Book and KD are offenders, right? So like that I think that's going to be a big part of what comes down to. And if you are a jump shooting team against this Minnesota team, or you have Nikola Jokic, one of those two things, then you can beat this Wolves team pretty not handily, but that's going to be where you have an advantage, is like you have a dude who Rudy Gobert just plain and simple can't stop, and that's Nikola. Or you have two dudes that can make shots from, they're two of the best hard shot makers in the world, really. And if Book is going to sort of take on a little bit more of a scoring role, then yeah, I think that's actually really good for this team, because honestly, as Brad Beal's been good at times, Eric Gordon's been a little bit of a disappointment, and I think that's kind of the realization for Book and KD is like, let's ramp up and keep going. And they've been beating some good teams, like you said, hardest schedule down the stretch in the history of the NBA. Perhaps it's just really unfair for them, but. Let me close it out here with a game that is on the other end of the spectrum from the one you just talked about, with two potential title contenders going up. I have two teams playing for the toilet bowl, and that is Portland at Washington, and I'm taking an under 220.5. I think this should be at like 212, 213. You want to talk about some bad offense that we're about to see. Let's talk about who's out. Let's just start there. Out for the Wizards. We've got Koulibaly that's out. We've got Kuz. We've got Denny Avia questionable. We got Rashawn Holmes questionable. We got Tyus Jones out. This is a typo. It says Bailey. That's not somebody, but there is somebody else important out for the Wizards. I think autocorrect messed me up there. But then we got one more dude also. So there's really no, we're talking about the Jordan Poole show here with some Corey Kispert mixed in. Tell me if I'm getting you excited to watch this game. And then on the other side here, it's going to be the Scoot and Ayton show with some Delano Blanton being featured at times as well. Like, when I saw Delano Bland's points at 20.5, I was like, can we end the season? We expect Delano Bland to score 20. And no shade. It's just like they're just going to be all backups on an already bad team playing in these games. It's similar to that Blazers Hornets game that was an easy under last time, where you've just got two inept offenses. And even without, like, Micic wasn't playing in that game. And like, who would have thought you'd miss him for being able to score points, right? If you look at the lineups that you're going to get from this Washington team, and you just go to 5-man lineups and you go to net ratings, you're going to see some nasty stuff. You're going to see like 48 offensive ratings in the course of like 15 minutes of play together between guys like, stop me if you've heard of Patrick Baldwin Jr. and Johnny Davis, right? You're going to get a lot of nasty stuff out there. If you look at the last five, where we're talking about Ayton being in for 4 of these 5 games. So like, don't come at me with like, oh, well, Ayton's going to be playing, because he has been DeAndre Hakeem Olajuwon Ayton for a while now, putting up some really good numbers. But like, how many points can you really score based on 17-foot jump shots? They're 30th in an offensive rating, 30th in effective field goal percentage. They're turning the ball over the second highest turnover percentage. They have the second worst free throw attempt rate, and they're making the fewest threes in the league over their last 5 games. And they played some good teams. They've also played plenty of bad teams. And so it's just the way that they're playing, even with a pace that's over their last 5, been 8th fastest. For Washington, they've been 2nd fastest. But if you want to talk about their offense, it's the 4th worst offensive rating in that time frame. It's the 18th in effective field goal percentage, and they're getting to the line the 3rd fewest amount of times of anybody in the league right now. So they're actually playing kind of good defense on both sides. The defensive rating for Washington over their last 6 games even is up to 8th best. Portland's is up to 20th best in the league, which is 10 slots higher than they are in terms of their offensive rating. So they are defending the rim. They're not giving up free throws. They're not giving up offensive rebounds either. They're closing out possessions. So they're both like limiting what the other teams are doing to enough degree that this should definitely go over like maybe a 212, 213 point game.
Are you actually going to watch this game? I remember, I think you said you turned into Portland and Charlotte, and you were like, League Pass asked me, like, are you sure?
Yeah.
I mean, this is absolutely gross. This is in the muck here. I have nothing really to add to it other than that Portland, it seems like, is the most reliable team to go below 90 points, like let alone 100. So,
yep.
I mean, unless Washington's going to just go off, like with Jordan Poole going for 37 against a team that mucks it up, like, yeah, it's probably not going over. I might have some interesting things to say about Bucks Raptors, which is open -17 for the Bucks.
Yeah.
We'll see who's going for the Raptors, though. I mean, the look, I think, is Giannis to carry the load here and get them on the right track. His prop opens at 30.5 points. He is questionable. Dame is questionable. So, yeah, we're going to have some more info. We're going to have player props up for you in the morning with that info. But, yeah, take it away.
Yeah, it's tough because if there's one team I couldn't even take a 17.5 point spread with, it's Toronto. Like, I would love to take them to cover against this sliding Bucks team who doesn't get back on defense. And we will have Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett in there. So there's probably something to them getting some good stats up for player props, like you said, but not enough to bet on this game without knowing if Dame, more importantly, like we expect Giannis to play. Dame is a legit questionable. They are now 1-7 without Dame, losing to some very bad teams, 2 in a row to the Wizards and the Grizzlies. Definitely some stuff to look at with that Toronto game, though. But that is all the time we have for you in the Best Bets video. Make sure to subscribe to that page so you do check out Play at Props. And until we see you next, happy betting.